A MAGA murder allegedly took place. Cayler Ellingson run down by a car. This gentleman here named Shannon Brandt charged with vehicular homicide and leaving the scene of an accident. We've got the probable cause statement. We've got the criminal complaint that we are going to take a look at. But let's get some background over from Town Hall about this young man who is unfortunately no longer with us. May he rest in peace. Cayler Ellingson, who was killed apparently because of his political disposition. This comes over from Town Hall. The alleged killer freed after confessing to mowing down the teen in a political argument. Suspected killer in North Dakota is accused of mowing down this young man, Caylor Ellingson, aged 18, in his car. Apparently a politically motivated attack resulting in his death. The man who did it charged with the crime, 41-year-old Shannon Joseph Brandt out of Glenfield. He was let out, $50,000 bond. County sheriff verified he's back on the streets until his next court appearance. He started scrubbing his Facebook account ever since he got out. You can see some of the booking photos have come in here from Mia Cathell on Twitter, so recommend to follow over there. But you see several of those booking photos, and we're going to take a look at the actual filings that came out, the probable cause affidavit, as well as other testimony. Let's go to those right now, in fact. So let's get those queued up. And we'll close that one out. Here is the probable, yes, okay. And let's get our red pen going before we jump in. This is the criminal complaint against Shannon Joseph Brandt for the apparently, allegedly political killing of a young man named Cayler out of North Dakota. You can see the Foster County State's attorney is charging him with several different crimes. One count of criminal vehicular homicide, a felony involving a motor vehicle, and it is in violation of the law there. It's a Class A felony, which I presume is the top level felony. On or about September 18th in North Dakota, the defendant committed the crime, causing the death of another. The death was committed when the individual was struck with a vehicle, causing his death, resulting in the charge of a Class A felony. Very generic statute. Died, vehicle was involved, not much to that one. Count 2, duty in an accident involving death or an injury with death. So this is the leaving the scene, right? If you are in an accident and you cause injury to somebody and you leave them there to die, you may be charged with that. Kind of a Good Samaritan law. On September 18, 2022, they say that Mr. Brandt drove a vehicle involved in an accident resulting in the death of a person and negligently failed to immediately stop or to return with the vehicle as close as possible to the scene and to give information and render aid as required. Actually pretty common statute, sort of a leaving the scene of an accident statute. You probably have something very similar in your state. We do in Arizona. That offense was committed when he failed to remain at the scene and fulfill the requirements, guilty of a Class B felony for that offense, all against the peace and dignity out of North Dakota. Complainant, prosecutor here, signed, submitted September 19, 2022. Now, the penalty section tells us what the maximum penalties will be. Of course, these are pretty hefty given the fact that they're very high penalties. Class A felony, meaning high-level felonies. Class A, 20 years. Class B, 10 years. Violation of the law, all sorts of collateral consequences. Collateral consequences means, if you are, let's say if you are an illegal migrant and you get convicted of a crime, one of the collateral consequences might be deportation. Collateral consequence of being convicted of a DUI, it's criminal. It might result in your driver's license, which is civil, being suspended. That is a collateral consequence. So obviously, if he's in prison for a long period of time, there will be a lot of those. Same thing with collateral consequences for felonies, right? Like you lose your right to possess a firearm and right to vote, those types of things. Submitted, approved by the state prosecutor. Her name is Kara Brinster. This is the criminal complaint, which will initiate the prosecution against Shannon Brandt. We also have the affidavit, which details the actual incident that took place. And so let's cue this one up and get here. The declaration of probable cause, Shannon Brandt charged with vehicular homicide in the killing alleged of a young Cayler. We see here the officer who responded to the scene out of North Dakota is Christopher L. Allen. He says, "I'm a licensed police officer, and I've been doing so in this jurisdiction for 9 years. We're in Foster County. It's September 18th. The time is 2:35 a.m. They're in an alleyway near Johnson Street and Jones Avenue, right off of McHenry. So there's this little alleyway back there in Foster, North Dakota. The individual charged with the crime was born in 1980, non-Hispanic. The driver of the vehicle was stopped in Glenfield, which is a different town. He was interviewed. He was placed under arrest. Charged with the following crimes: vehicular homicide and leaving the scene of an accident causing death. Now we get to the probable cause statement. The officer writes, on September 18, 2022, I, Trooper Allen, was contacted by another sergeant named Sergeant Cashin, and I was requested to respond to the northern Foster County for a fatality hit-and-run accident. I responded from my residence north of Jamestown, and according to the state radio logs, the reporting party, identified as Shannon Brandt, stated he struck a pedestrian because the pedestrian was threatening him. Brandt stated the pedestrian called some people, and Brandt was afraid they were coming to get him. Brandt admitted to state radio that he hit the pedestrian, and the pedestrian was part of a Republican extremist group. Once on scene, I met with Foster County Sheriff Johnson and was shown the area of the incident. Limited evidence was observed in the nighttime. A first responder who was first on scene was interviewed and showed where the male pedestrian's body was approximately located. This responder, identified as Jerome Short, stated that the family of the pedestrian showed up along the family of Brandt shortly after his arrival. Oh my God. Sergeant Cashin and Foster County Deputy Cruz responded to Brandt's parents' house in rural McHenry and then to Brandt's house in Glenfield. There, Brandt was interviewed by Sergeant Cashin outside his residence, and he admitted to consuming alcohol prior to the incident. Brandt admitted to striking the pedestrian with his car because he had a political argument with the pedestrian and believed the pedestrian was calling people to come and get him. Brandt admitted to leaving the scene of the incident and returning shortly after, where he called 911. Brandt did not remain on the scene till law enforcement arrived and ultimately returned to his residence. Brandt was placed under arrest for DUI by Sergeant Cashin and transported to the Stutsman County Jail. Brandt was advised of his Miranda rights and his implied consent advisory, consented to a chemical breath test, and the results of the chemical breath test were above the legal limit of .08. Now, he probably went home because his BAC was significantly higher than that, and the part of the reason to go home was to wash out some of that alcohol before he had to do that blood test. It was probably significantly higher than .08, just given the fact that he was still positive. I don't know how much time elapsed between the time he left and the time he came back, but they do sort of a poor job with times in this, right? They're not really detailed on the times. We have a date on 9/18. Okay, according to radio logs, he does all this investigation and then he shows up, but we don't know what time any of this was. And time is pretty important for DUI. Now, the pedestrian was identified as at the Carrington Hospital as Cayler. I met with his parents at Grace City. I asked what time Cayler contacted them, to which Cayler's mother informed me that Cayler called her at approximately 2:41 hours. She stated that Cayler asked if they knew Brandt, to which she stated her parents did not, but they believed that Cayler did. Cayler's mother stated that she told Cayler she was on her way to get him. A short time later, Cayler called, again stated that he or they were chasing him, and after this, she could not reach him. Brandt's phone call to the state radio was logged at approximately 2:55 hours. Pronounced deceased at the Carrington Hospital. Oh my God, it's just one of the most... it's just one of the worst things ever, you know. All right, so mom calls young 18-year-old son who got ran over by a crazed person who thinks that Republican extremists are after him. I wonder where that came from. And mom calls, son's dying there on the side of the road, shows up, and he is just dead. So, you know, all right. So that is just one of the worst things that you could ever imagine. Let's continue on. We see now that Mr. Shannon Brandt was booked into jail. The bond was posted out of Foster County, $50,000. and he has been released. Local news got some coverage on this, and they are communicating that the judge had a conversation with him during the initial arraignment, and he is sort of shocked. He doesn't really understand what happened and what is happening. And I have represented people like this. My law firm has represented people in situations like this, not a political involvement situation, but in hit and runs and vehicular homicides. And he deserves the presumption of innocence like anybody else. And honestly, I feel bad for him for having his mind so twisted by the disgusting people who are in charge of our government to inculcate his mind that it's okay to run somebody over because they're extremist Republicans. Here he is.
I don't understand the differences.
41-year-old Shannon Brandt had a tough time understanding the charges against him, vehicular homicide and leaving the scene of a deadly accident. A judge ordered Brandt held on $50,000 cash, which he objected, saying he's not a flight risk.
A job and a life and a house and things that I don't exactly want to see, go by the wayside. Family that are very important to me.
Yeah, family and lives that are very important. And, his life's over.
I don't understand that.
And an 18-year-old kid's life's over, all for politics, because our psycho president is out there calling half the country extremist Republicans. Insane. And it's just horrible, right? It's absolutely, it breaks my heart all over the place. So what a joke.